We were sitting around the dinner table like we always did, pretending time and tension didn't exist. Plates were passed. Someone laughed too loudly. The room smelled like warm food and forced comfort. I remember thinking how normal it all looked from the outside, how anyone watching would assume we were close, functional, safe. I let myself relax for just a second. That was my mistake. In the middle of a story I wasn't even listening to, my niece leaned across the table and grabbed my bracelet. She lifted it into the light like she had discovered something impressive. She laughed and announced that her mom said it was from a flea market and not worth anything. The words landed heavy. The room went silent. No one corrected her. No one laughed it off. No one defended me. I felt heat rise in my face, not from shame, but from understanding. That bracelet wasn't about money. It wasn't about brands or status. It marked a moment when I survived something that almost erased me. I bought it after rebuilding my life from nothing, after choosing myself when no one else did. Sitting there, smiling to keep the peace, I felt something inside me crack. This wasn't a careless joke. It was confidence. It was practiced. It was taught. I saw it clearly then. This wasn't accidental cruelty. It was intentional. I looked around the table and realized this dinner wasn't about family at all. It was about power, stories, and who was allowed to feel small. I didn't react then, but I decided I would remember everything. To understand why that moment cut so deeply, you have to understand who I am to this family. I'm the one who worked quietly, kept my head down, and never announced wins. I never borrowed money, never asked for favors, never made my struggles public. Years ago, I married into this family with nothing extra to offer but effort. I built my career step by step, without guidance, without safety nets, without applause. As time passed, something strange happened. My stability didn't earn respect, it created distance. Success made me suspicious in their eyes, not impressive. I paid for my own life, my own mistakes, and my own growth, but that independence made people uncomfortable. It was easier for them to believe I was lucky than disciplined, pretending than capable. That bracelet was my private reward. I bought it after surviving a brutal chapter that almost broke me, a season I never fully explained to anyone. It wasn't flashy. It was personal. But no one asked what it meant or how I earned it. They filled the silence with assumptions. I learned early to stay polite, to minimize myself, and to avoid challenging their assumptions. I told myself silence was maturity, that patience would eventually earn trust. Instead, it trained them to see me as background noise, someone present but unimportant. Every gathering reinforced that role, every comment sharpened it. I smiled through discomfort and corrected nothing, thinking harmony mattered more than dignity. Looking back, that habit didn't protect relationships. It protected a false version of me that was easier for them to dismiss and easier for me to endure. At the time, I didn't realize cost. My sister-in-law treated me like an outsider playing dress-up, someone reaching above their station. The rest of the family followed her lead, tolerating me but never fully accepting me. That dinner wasn't really about jewelry at all. It was about reminding me where they believed I stood. What I didn't know yet was how long this narrative had been building behind my back. I started to see that comment not as a single moment, but as part of a pattern I had ignored for years. There were always small remarks, disguised as humor, about my clothes being too much or my job being interesting in that careful tone. My independence was treated like a flaw, something amusing rather than earned. Every comment was light enough to deny, sharp enough to sting. My sister-in-law was skilled at this. She never raised her voice or said anything outright cruel. Instead, she smiled, laughed, and let disrespect hide behind charm. She did it most when her daughter was watching. I noticed how my niece would glance at her mother before speaking, copying her expressions, her timing, even her pauses. Disrespect wasn't taught directly. It was modeled. That night at dinner, when the bracelet comment landed, the silence confirmed everything. No one defended me. No one corrected her. The quiet felt deliberate, like agreement without words. That absence of support hurt more than the insult itself. It told me exactly where I ranked in the room. Driving home later, I replayed years of moments I had brushed aside. The jokes I laughed at. The comments I excused. The discomfort I swallowed to keep peace. I realized how often I minimized myself to avoid conflict. The bracelet incident stripped away my excuses. They didn't think I deserved nice things. They didn't think I earned them. For the first time, I stopped labeling it harmless. I stopped protecting their intentions instead of my dignity. I saw the pattern clearly, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That realization changed the way I remembered every gathering, every smile, every invitation I once felt grateful to receive. I understood that peace had come at my expense, and silence had taught them comfort mattered more than fairness. Accepting that truth felt heavy, but it also felt honest, like finally standing on solid ground without pretending anymore or hiding discomfort behind forced smiles and patience learned too early. I still didn't know how far they had already gone. A few days later, I realized the comment at dinner wasn't isolated at all. A cousin mentioned, casually, that they had heard I liked fake designer stuff. Another relative asked me where I found such cheap finds with a smile that lingered. Each comment felt rehearsed, polished, and strangely confident. The same story kept appearing, always tracing back to the same source. My sister-in-law had been quietly telling people that my lifestyle was an act. She said I exaggerated success, that I dressed for attention, and that nothing was as it seemed. Hearing it secondhand made me feel exposed in a way confrontation never had. I was furious, but I didn't react or correct anyone. Instead, I watched. I paid attention to smiles that faded when I walked in, to conversations that shifted mid-sentence. I noticed how questions stopped and how eyes followed me. This wasn't jealousy anymore. It felt organized. The bracelet had simply been the easiest symbol to mock. I understood then that confronting rumors would only feed them. So I stayed quiet and started collecting details. I saved messages, remembered who said what, and noted how stories changed depending on the audience. I wasn't planning revenge, I was protecting the truth. Something in my gut told me clarity would matter more than arguments. The more I learned, the smaller the insult itself became. What frightened me wasn't the lie, but how easily it traveled. I realized I was standing in the middle of a story already in motion. And I had no idea where it was heading yet. That uncertainty pushed me to stay observant instead of emotional. Every interaction became data, every comment a clue I filed away. I didn't realize it yet, but this was the moment my strategy quietly began. Nothing about it felt dramatic or brave at the time. It felt cautious, slow, and strangely lonely. Still, I trusted that patience would reveal more than anger ever could. I had no idea how true that instinct would become. That awareness changed how I listened, how I remembered, and how I prepared myself going forward. What I discovered next made the bracelet seem insignificant. I slowly began to understand that the disrespect had a motive behind it. My niece started asking strange questions about inheritance, money, and who owned what in the family. She asked them casually, like curiosity, but the timing felt off. At the same time, I learned my sister-in-law had been struggling financially, quietly and defensively. My independence didn't inspire her, it threatened the image she relied on. If I was genuinely successful, then her role as the responsible one fell apart. So she rewrote the story before anyone else could question it. She framed me as fake, careless, and undeserving. It was easier to tear me down than explain her own situation. Suddenly, the confidence behind my niece's words made sense. Those comments weren't random or childish. They were rehearsed, tested, and approved. That bracelet wasn't just mocked. It was targeted. What hurt most wasn't the jealousy. It was the betrayal. I had shown up for birthdays, holidays, emergencies, and quiet moments no one else volunteered for. I brought gifts, offered help, and stayed neutral during conflicts. I believed consistency mattered. Realizing that loyalty had been repaid with a narrative campaign felt disorienting. I wasn't being misunderstood. I was being managed. That realization changed my behavior completely. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped correcting lies in real time. Instead, I started documenting everything. Messages, dates, shifting stories, small contradictions. I wasn't building a case to attack anyone. I was building clarity for myself. I finally understood the situation wasn't about pride or insecurity. It was about control, and who got to define the truth. Preparing quietly felt strange, but it gave me stability. Every note reminded me I wasn't imagining patterns or exaggerating harm. The truth became solid, something I could stand on without approval. I didn't need to confront immediately. I needed to be ready, patient, and precise. Timing mattered more than emotion, and silence became my strongest advantage. Once I saw that clearly, the fear drained away. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Because when someone tries to control the narrative, the most dangerous thing you can do is take your power back quietly. I prepared quietly, without announcing anything to anyone. I gathered proof the way someone packs supplies before a storm, calmly and methodically. Receipts, certificates, emails, photographs, and documents tied to my work and my purchases went into one place. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted facts that didn't depend on anyone's opinion. The bracelet itself came with everything. A full appraisal. An insurance record. A clear purchase history that showed when, where, and how it was bought. I scanned it all. I saved messages where relatives repeated the flea market story, unknowingly confirming the lie as it spread. Each screenshot felt strange, like collecting evidence of something I never asked to be accused of. Over time, I noticed inconsistencies. My sister-in-law contradicted herself depending on who she spoke to. Dates shifted. Details changed. Confidence faded. Every contradiction went into a folder I never mentioned to anyone. I wasn't planning to expose her publicly or humiliate her. I just wanted to protect my name and my sense of reality. The process did something unexpected. It gave me confidence again. I stopped rehearsing defenses in my head. I stopped worrying about being believed. I knew the truth, and I could prove it if I ever needed to. For the first time, I wasn't reactive. I was prepared. Preparation changed the way I walked into the next family gathering. My posture shifted. My silence felt deliberate, not fearful. I didn't need approval or validation. I had facts, patience, and time. And that combination felt powerful in a way I hadn't experienced before. I wasn't rushing toward confrontation anymore. I was waiting. I reminded myself that silence was a choice, not fear, and observation was its own form of action. Every smile, every question, every pause at the table would reveal something useful. I didn't need to speak loudly to be heard anymore. I trusted preparation more than emotion. The folder stayed closed, but its weight steadied me. Whatever happened next, I knew I would not be caught off guard again. That certainty settled in my chest, calm and firm, replacing doubt with patience I had never allowed myself before fully. Because the next dinner wasn't going to be quiet. Nothing about the confrontation happened the way I imagined it would. At another family event, weeks later, my niece walked in wearing a bracelet almost identical to mine. She held out her wrist proudly and announced it was the same kind as mine, then laughed. Something tightened in my chest, sharp and immediate, but I stayed calm. I realized this was no longer simple disrespect. It was imitation mixed with resentment, a need to mock and mirror at the same time. Other people noticed the tension before I said anything. The room shifted. Someone glanced from her wrist to mine and asked, half joking, if mine was real this time. The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Instead of answering, I smiled politely and said nothing. That silence did something unexpected. It made people uncomfortable. Conversations stalled. My sister-in-law froze, then tried to laugh it off, but her eyes kept darting toward me. I watched her panic without raising my voice or lifting my hand. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself or correcting lies. I was letting the absence of explanation do the work. In that moment, I understood power differently. By refusing to explain myself, I forced everyone else to sit with the doubt she had created. The story she controlled suddenly felt unstable. I didn't need to reveal proof or confront anyone publicly. My calm was enough to disrupt the narrative. I could feel the shift happen in real time, subtle but undeniable. I stayed quiet for the rest of the event, answering unrelated questions, smiling when necessary, leaving early without explanation. On the drive home, my hands shook, not from fear, but from clarity. I finally saw how easily truth surfaces when lies are starved of attention. That reaction, the discomfort, the panic, told me everything I needed to know about who held the truth and who feared it. That night, I realized silence had become my sharpest tool, and I trusted myself completely without apology or fear. What I did next forced the truth into the open. After that night, I stopped trying to win approval and started protecting my peace. I didn't make announcements or dramatic speeches. I simply reduced contact. I declined invitations with polite excuses. I stopped sharing personal updates, plans, or successes. I answered messages briefly and without detail. The boundaries weren't loud, but they were firm. That approach confused them more than confrontation ever would have. Without access to my life, their stories had nothing new to feed on. Speculation dried up. Assumptions stalled. I focused my energy on my work, my friends, and building stability that didn't rely on family validation. My world became quieter, and in that quiet, I felt stronger. The bracelet stayed on my wrist. I didn't hide it. I didn't explain it. It existed without permission, just like I did. I realized something important during that time. I didn't owe anyone proof of my worth. I didn't owe explanations for my choices or my success. Still, knowing I had the proof if I ever needed it gave me calm confidence. Distance brought clarity I never had before. I saw how often I had shrunk myself to make others comfortable. How often I had softened my voice, minimized my achievements, or laughed things off to keep peace. Walking away from that pattern wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was choosing long-term stability over short-term comfort. As weeks passed, I noticed how much lighter I felt without constant self-monitoring. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head. I stopped anticipating insults disguised as jokes. My life expanded the moment I stopped trying to fit inside someone else's expectations. And without me present to absorb tension, the family dynamic shifted on its own. I didn't need to correct lies anymore. I didn't need to defend myself. I simply wasn't available to be reduced. That decision set everything else in motion, quietly and inevitably. Because when you step back, people are forced to face themselves. I didn't orchestrate what happened next. I didn't push anything forward. I just stayed consistent, calm, and distant. And that distance became the most powerful statement I had ever made. Because the fallout came without my involvement. Over time, the lies started unraveling on their own. I didn't push, correct, or remind anyone of the truth. I just stayed quiet and consistent. My sister-in-law began getting caught exaggerating other things, unrelated details that made people pause. Stories didn't line up. Timelines shifted. Small cracks appeared, then widened. People who once nodded along started asking follow-up questions she couldn't answer. Financial issues surfaced next. Nothing dramatic, just enough to change how people listened to her. Sympathy thinned. Trust softened. The confident tone she once used disappeared, replaced by defensiveness. My niece repeated a story to the wrong person one afternoon, and it directly contradicted what others had already heard. That moment spread faster than anything I ever could have said. Suddenly, I wasn't the problem anymore. The spotlight moved without me stepping into it. I stayed silent while the narrative collapsed under its own weight. Family members began reaching out privately, asking careful questions they should have asked years ago. I answered calmly, without emotion or accusation. I didn't expose anyone. I clarified facts when asked and left the rest unsaid. That approach mattered. It allowed people to reach their own conclusions without feeling manipulated. I watched relationships quietly reset around me. Some people apologized. Others avoided the topic completely. Both reactions told me enough. Karma didn't arrive loudly or dramatically. It arrived slowly, through embarrassment, inconsistency, and the steady loss of credibility. Watching that happen confirmed something important. Stepping back had been the right decision. Fighting would have kept me stuck in their story. Distance let the truth breathe on its own. I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. The tension I carried for years dissolved as accountability found its own path. By the time things settled, I realized I had nothing left to prove to anyone. The story had corrected itself without my help. And just when I thought it was over, I received a message I never expected, one that meant the final chapter wasn't finished yet. That moment reminded me how silence can be louder than arguments, and patience often reveals what force never could. But there was still one conversation left. Eventually, the confrontation came, but not in the way I expected. My sister-in-law approached me alone, away from the group, her posture tight and guarded. There was no apology, just awkward discomfort and excuses. She claimed things had been misunderstood and blamed harmless jokes taken too far. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I took a breath and spoke calmly, letting each word land without haste. I told her I knew exactly what she had said, to whom, and why. I explained that my boundaries weren't temporary, nor were they punishment. They existed to protect my peace, my dignity, and my sense of self. She avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably, and that told me far more than any words ever could. There was no need to produce receipts, proofs, or explanations. The shift in power had already occurred. I left that conversation lighter than I had felt in years. It wasn't triumph that filled me, but freedom. I no longer needed validation or permission to exist fully within this family. The bracelet stayed on my wrist, a quiet reminder of the life I had survived and rebuilt, of patience, strategy, and the courage to step back rather than fight in chaos. It symbolized resilience, dignity, and clarity. Walking away, I realized something simple but profound: confrontation doesn't always require conflict. Sometimes, the quiet acknowledgement of truth is enough to reset everything. I didn't need to shout, argue, or prove myself. I only needed presence, patience, and calm resolve. That lesson carried weight far beyond that evening, beyond the rooms of my home, and even beyond the reach of anyone who had tried to control my story. I had survived, and in surviving, I had defined my own narrative. And that lesson stayed with me long after the dinner tables emptied. Looking back, the bracelet taught me more than I expected. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of survival, of effort, of moments I had earned for myself. What hurt wasn't the object itself, it was what the object represented. Independence, success, and resilience make some people uncomfortable. When they feel threatened, they attack the symbol rather than confronting reality. I learned something vital: you don't owe proof to people who are determined to misunderstand you. Arguments, explanations, or justifications are often wasted on those committed to doubt. Silence, preparation, and clear boundaries communicate strength louder than any fight ever could. Respect isn't negotiated, it's enforced by how you carry yourself and what you allow. Walking away, protecting my peace, and refusing to shrink myself preserved dignity far more than confrontation would have. If any of this resonates with you, know this: stepping back isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's letting people reveal their true selves while you remain grounded. Sometimes, the best response is no response at all. It's choosing clarity over chaos, patience over reaction, and self-worth over approval. That's the real power of knowing your value. So I have to ask, what would you have done in my place?